So, you've been asked to administer a Morrisby profile to a group of students. It's very easy, not a lot goes wrong. I'm going to talk you through in a few minutes a few of the key things. Firstly, you should have a single sheet of paper, two-sided, as we've got on screen here, and it starts off with Morrisby profile administration notes. There is a full administration manual available if you'd like to access a bit of context. Just ask your career advisor if that's the case. Timing. It's going to be an hour and 40 minutes minimum, but quite often longer than that, often because students take breaks, take a bit more time over practice questions, have issues with original registration or IT setup, etc. So you should be planning for a little bit under or around 2 hours. And the whole process involves a number of timed assessments and untimed multiple choice questionnaire. Each of the timed assessments is controlled by a countdown timer. So when the student starts, the countdown timer starts and counts down to 0, at which point the test stops, whether or not the student has finished, and then moved on to the next exercise. If a student does finish early, they cannot choose to fast track the process and move on to the next assessment. They have to wait for the countdown timer to reach 0. The whole process is self-paced. Students can take breaks where they want, have a stretch where they want, but when they're on, in terms of doing the testing, they should be fully focused. And typically, as part of the instructions, 1 or 2 short breaks, like stretch breaks, look around the room but don't leave your desk breaks, will have been organised. But that is something that can be determined at school level. At the end of the whole process, students will finish at different times. There could be up to 15 minutes gap between the first and the last in a group. And that would be because some would not take a break, they'd go through the practice questions very quickly, they'd have no IT issues and have completed registration quickly. Others less so. Things to point out to the student are listed on this sheet, but key things for me are that this is a performance event, but it's not an exam because we're not measuring learned knowledge. We're instead measuring an underlying capacity to solve problems presented in different ways. And they shouldn't expect to finish all the items in the timed assessments. They should just do as well as they possibly can in each of them. These are hard. Statistically, about 1 in 100 people will get all the items right on one of the timed assessments, but it's rare to get all the items right on 2. Now, partly this is because the questions just get very hard, but partly also it's because the time limits we give them require them to work with a combination of speed and accuracy. So students have a style where they just work quite slowly and check all their answers thoroughly, particularly near the start of the assessments where the questions are easier. This doesn't normally benefit their final score. So good advice would be to work as quickly as you can, but not so fast that you're bound to make mistakes. It's important to point out that there's no pass or fail here, and they're not being ranked against other students in the school. We're looking at their internal structure, trying to work out where their natural abilities and natural strengths lie. And the idea is that if they can focus on subjects, and then later on courses and careers, which feed off their relative strengths, their natural ability, then they're more likely to excel than if they try to do things they're just not as good at. In terms of the results, these may or may not be available to them immediately when they finish the assessments. This is a system option, so ask your careers advisor how this will work at your school. If results are released at a later time, students will be told when this will be, and it's typically in an evening or at a time when they don't have friends around them and they can sit and focus on their own results. A final point to make is that it's quite common for students to start off quite slowly, reading the practice questions thoroughly, but as they go through the assessments they start to think, I can work out what I'm doing as I go. And there's a tendency later on not to spend enough time on the practice questions. So I always reinforce the fact that practice questions are important. Now on the back page on the right hand side here, there are a few questions and answers. The most important point, I think, is that every time somebody gives a response to a question, their response and the time is logged by the Morrisby servers. This means that if anything goes wrong, a fire alarm, their battery dies, anything like that, they can simply close their browser and come back to the same device or a different device 10 minutes later, 2 days later, doesn't matter. They log back in and they'll be brought back to exactly where they were with a countdown timer in the right place. So they can't lose any information. However, it's really not a good idea to stop students partway through one of the timed assessments as they get into a mental role on their approach to answering questions, and a break will potentially reset that and impact their results. Now you should have a second document as on screen, and here is a simple landscape sheet. I always print this and take it along to the test session. I'd usually also write the information on the board. They go to MorrisbyAdminStaffTraining.com, click on sign up, which is top right, enter the code provided and follow the instructions. What I'm going to do now is run you through the actual registration process. Now when you go to MorrisbyAdminStaffTraining.com, you have the option of log in or sign up, top right. When students are initially registering, they use sign up in order to register their details. Once they've been through the process, got their results, they come back to the same website but use login instead to have a look at them. Now I'm going to sign up and enter a code and enter details. Now students should use their school email address as the default, but they can't copy and paste it, we have to retype it again. And the password, anything combination of letters, numbers, symbols, etc., at least 6 of them. And they will need to remember this because they'll be in and out of Morrisby hopefully many times in the next few years. Parents won't be able to access the password, nor will you, nor can I, nor can Morrisby. So if students lose the password at any point, they need to go through a password recovery process called Forgotten Login at the top here. And that password recovery process involves an email being sent to the email address they've registered with. So if they register with an incorrect email, password recovery is more complex. Clicking through the sign up, there's a page talking about their rights and our use of the data, and we're asked to confirm a few bits of information. I'm actually going to say that I'm in year 10 here, so I've been put up a year, and you do have to say if English is your first language. It's the only piece of information that's required. If they use a secondary email address, that's handy in terms of password recovery, but not necessary. Click on next, and we go into the profiling screen with the first assessment ready. Now it says 7 minutes, but it's actually including instructions and practice. We assume 2 minutes for the instructions, so we click on start and go through the practice questions. Now I'm going to knock through these really quickly, but clearly the students will take their time and make sure they understood the process. It now does say there are 32 questions and 5 minutes. When they click start, you can see top right the countdown timer, and they simply select an answer. So that's it. I'm sure everything will go well on the day, but if not, there are some phone numbers here that you could call. Thank you.